Bitcoin has broken out, tagging 104,000 as of yesterday. I'm going to do an update because obviously the last update I did a couple of days ago was after the FOMC. Even though Jerome Powell was fairly hawkish, the markets have shrugged off that hawkish or more so bearish news. Obviously, if the Fed are hawkish, it means they're less likely to be cutting rates or ending QT anytime soon. Despite that, crypto has rallied. So, is this pump for real? Can this pump be sustained? I'm going to jump into the charts. I'm going to update my paths for Bitcoin over the rest of the year today. So, stay tuned to find out what I think and what my view is for the rest of the year based on the new information we've got. And obviously, it is some pretty big information. We were previously down here on Wednesday, and I did think, look, there's a chance that we could roll over from here and actually come back and retest around the 90,000 level, coming down to these moving averages. But we've actually gone the other way and we've pumped up. So we're actually coming into a little bit of resistance here around this 786 level. So let's see what happens here. I think this would be a likely area for a pullback. If we don't, of course, it means we're going to go higher and we're going to test all-time highs at around about 109,000. So it's going to go one of two ways. I can easily see this market pushing on higher from here. And I think if we get there, we likely go up to higher prices sooner rather than later. So obviously, on the previous stream, I did talk about the fact that I thought we could do something like this. I said this was a possibility that we could actually consolidate above this key resistance here that we got above. Obviously, the source of our breakdown, we're above the yearly open as well. And if we were to grind in here, we might actually make a base and a platform to push on to new all-time highs. And I essentially had this Fibonacci extension has been a target for the cycle, this 1.618 at around about 131,000. I've actually been through my trading plan for the year. Earlier on this year, I actually did some analysis where I sort of mapped out the path that I thought the stock market would follow based on prior post-election years over the last few decades. And believe it or not, when I went back and looked at that, it actually had told me that I should be looking to position in at the lows in March and April, and actually that I should be looking to probably take some profits in the summer and then reposition in again around September time for a final pump into the end of the year. This is just based on what the stock market has done in post-election years. So looking at the S&P here, I've actually already updated this path, and I think what this could look like is we see some chop over the summer period. So the S&P is actually, unlike crypto, it has actually come into resistance at around about 5,700, and the S&P has been unable so far to push through that resistance. So maybe we go a bit higher, but what this tells me is that bulls are starting to run out of steam here. And what I'm expecting to actually see is for the stock market to come back down and refill some of this inefficiency down to around this 5,300 area. And if I just put on a Fibonacci retracement from the lows here up to the recent high, you can actually see our 0.5 comes in around about 5,266. And I think that would be a pretty ideal level for us to tag before potentially going up higher, putting in a little bit of a trap, maybe in the middle or towards the end of the summer. And then I think from that point, we could then roll over in September time. And then September is probably the dip that you want to buy, searching for new all-time highs going into the end of this year and into next year on the stock market. So that's what I'm currently thinking right now, is the path that plays out for stocks. And therefore, I'm actually thinking that cryptocurrency follows a similar path to this. So if we can sort of map out, and of course, none of this is with certainty. At any point, something could come out and obviously change this path, and we'd have to modify it or deviate it. But At the moment, it's looking fairly realistic for me, just based on the fact that we've had this very hawkish Fed. We've had Donald Trump making comments around trade deals. Obviously, these are big news stories, trade deals, buy stocks today, all of this kind of stuff. We've got Scott Bessent, I believe, going to Switzerland to meet with China over the weekend. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of optimism that all of this was just trade wars, and actually the worst of this is actually out of the way. However, we're actually also hearing reports that ports in the US are now empty because no goods and services are coming in. And I think we could actually see a scare over the summer, which takes us lower. And I just feel like this is going to be chopped from here. I think we're getting to the point where upside in the stock market is fairly muted, and there is a greater chance that we could roll over and see some lower prices. And look, maybe it's not this volatile. Maybe the path is something a little bit more like this, and we come down here later on in September. Certainly, if we don't get down here in the middle of the summer, I would favor us coming down and filling some of these inefficiencies in down in sort of August, September time. I actually think September is more likely, so I'm just going to move that across. But I think either way, we do get down to around 3,500. If I actually look at the futures chart, we can see we do have a futures gap there. Obviously, this will be on the S&P cash market as well, and that's coming in just above 5,300. So I do think that gap gets filled at some point. Whether it happens over the next month or two, or whether it happens by the end of the summer, I do think that is a fairly high probability of being filled, especially with the uncertainty around the market right now. So with that in mind, in terms of this is what I believe the stock market is going to do, and obviously this aligns with my trading plan, which I really should have been referencing and following earlier on this year, because I would have been getting in on these dips in crypto as well as stocks. Obviously, I did it for stocks. I didn't do it for crypto just because I started to get a little bit carried away by all of the bearish sentiment. But we are where we are, and how I'm playing this, or how I'm wanting to play this, is just to be very cautious right now on buying here, because really in the summer period, and we saw this last summer, we saw a large range, a lot of chop. Pretty much all of the highs got faded and the lows got bought. So I'm thinking we probably see a similar range this year over the summer. And if we actually look at how big this range was, if I can get that low here, it was around about a 25% range. So can we see something similar for Bitcoin from here? And is that what we're actually doing now? Are we actually making a high of this range? And if we were to actually come back down 25% to the downside, that would take us close to the current lows. Of course, we might actually go higher first. We might actually come up to 116. I don't think we'll go straight up to 130,000, but anything could happen, right? Obviously, if we did come back up to the previous all-time highs and then come off, that would take us around about to 80. So you'd be looking at a range from around about 110 down to 80,000. Part of me says that the trajectory and where we are in terms of the market cycle is just completely different to last year. So I'm a little bit reluctant to think it actually plays out that way again. But like I say, I'm expecting probably a pullback in the stock market and then a low to come in for the stock market in September. So what are my paths on Bitcoin? Well, obviously we got the path that I already drew. I'm not too sure. Right, let's go with the bullish path first. So obviously everybody's feeling quite bullish now. Let's be on the side of optimism and let's kind of see where we go from here. I think this is going to go one or two ways on the bullish side. And I don't actually know if this would be bullish if it were to play out this way, but let's give it a go. So I really think to myself, if we're looking from now until the end of this year, let's say, for example, crypto, because I think crypto has proven that it is deviating away from the stock market. So potentially we're going to see crypto run up to new all-time highs. Maybe it just pierces those all-time highs. Maybe it goes full send a lot higher. I think this is a lot less likely, but the path is going to remain the same. Whether we come up to 113,000 or we shoot through, I think at some point we find some resistance. And maybe it's now, maybe it's here, maybe it's a bit higher. But I think we find some resistance. And I think we go into, like I say, this choppy market over the summer. And I don't completely know how this plays out, but I think we go into some sort of chop over the summer and potentially we come down and make a low in September as we did last year or close enough to last year. Maybe that sweeps these lows, maybe that goes a little lower, but I think from there, that is when potentially we get our final blow off top. So this is one this is one path that I'm entertaining here. That we could go something like that. We could also do something like this, and we don't actually go as high here. And actually, this pump just comes and forms a lower high before actually rolling over. So I'm very much open to something like this happening for Bitcoin. And of course, everybody would start to get super bullish as we make this high. This would be one, two, three. So this would be, in a way, a triple top. But I'm sure you'd start to get divergence on the weekly when we were to make these moves. Obviously, we've already started to see divergence between these two peaks. Maybe this is going to be a third divergence if we make new all-time highs. So I think I could see something like this playing out. Just a very choppy summer environment, slowly sort of bleeding with pumps along the way, similar to what I think the stock market does. A low coming in September, and then a final pump towards the end of the year. So, whether this comes from here or whether, whether that makes a new all-time high, whether it doesn't, I'm not completely convinced it does. But let's see. And this also I think goes into the end of May. So I think maybe by the end of May, we've seen that high come in and we start to chop around the summer. We consolidate. Obviously, this consolidation above 90K, we have maybe probably a shakeout into the end of the year below this again, and we go for sort of one final pump. And I'm sure when this breakdown happens, people start to get too bearish again. But Bitcoin has that resilience, and I definitely think this is a possibility for the market. This is probably the more, I don't know, the more neutral outlook, I guess. This is consolidation at the highs, a pump higher, and then we sort of fall off from there. The other path that I was drawing, which was a more bearish path, I think I kind of have to not walk away from it at this point, but obviously we can extend this higher to where we've come in now. But again, I don't see there being a big breakdown from here. I mean, we could go lower, but for me, it's gonna be a similar sort of path with potentially a low coming in September, some sort of recovery. People start to think that we're gonna sort of go a lot higher, but I think this move coming in September is a bit too much. I don't think it would happen like that. I think maybe we'd get a move back towards 60,000, or even the previous cycle all-time high was at around about 68. So maybe we get something like this and we get that final pump, and then from there we sort of go down to lower prices. So you can see really between these two paths, when this loads up, It's whether we have a higher consolidation or whether actually we have more of a lower consolidation and more of a breakdown into the end of the year as opposed to a break up. I mean, potentially this breakdown happens later going into next year. Potentially this even puts in a new all-time high at the end of the year. I'm not too sure, but anyways, you're getting the general idea of what I think the path will be for Bitcoin for the rest of this year. Summer consolidation, low coming in September, pump into the end of the year. And this one is following the same path, you know, albeit it's coming lower, but it's just more volatility. And it would mean consolidation over the summer based upon like the range that we've seen between around 105,000 and 75,000. So obviously around about 25% or $30,000 range as we saw last summer, and then a final pump. And obviously this would really just follow the fractals from last summer. Not that I'm a big fan of fractals, but this is a path that we definitely have to entertain. One of these two paths, I think, are fairly likely. So if I had to give it probability, I think based on this breakout, this is probably the most probable path, right? That we come up, we make a new all-time high, we consolidate, we then risk breaking down, we go for one final all-time high into the end of the year, and that very much follows what I'm expecting the stock market to do, with some consolidation over the summer, coming back, retesting some of these lows, sell off into September, and then sort of pumping into the end of the year. So I do definitely think that Bitcoin can follow one of these two paths. I'll just entertain what the other path would be, and that would be if Bitcoin goes absolutely parabolic here, and actually we see something similar to what we saw in the last bull market, where we see something like this happen, where we see a new all-time high and then price just start to really fall away. My issues with this is that that would mean that this breakdown happened how many weeks after the all-time high? I mean, it really happened around about 27 weeks after the all-time high. So that's about 6 months after the all-time high is when we broke down. So if we put in a new all-time high for Bitcoin in May, let's say late May, then 26 weeks would have us breaking down in November, when I expect actually the market to be doing quite well, especially the stock market to be doing quite well in the November period. So it's very difficult for me to do a path that has us sort of coming up here into the end of May, and then we get, sort of slammed back down, and we do something like this, and then it's like this. I mean, that just seems quite unrealistic to me, because I'm expecting the stock market to be pumping through this period that we have this path going down. So that's why I just don't think that a pump here and then into a bear market is actually so likely. I'm actually preferring that we see some sort of choppy period, some sort of consolidation. We go for a final pump towards the end of the year, and then we sell off from there. And of course, that aligns with the 4-year cycle yet again. So, and we don't have to get that. Maybe it is just a whole topping process, and actually the highs are already in, and we're getting closer and closer to the highs, and people are getting overly bullish on these tops, and it never actually gets there. So, yeah, I really, really do think that we are in a topping process. I think anything anything above 105,000 on Bitcoin is probably a decent sell. What will cause me to change this? I think it would have to be a macro policy shift. And maybe that's what we get towards the end of the year. Maybe we get rate cuts. Maybe we get a pause in QT following September. If we were to get a decent sort of pullback there, maybe that is when we get this move. And of course, the market is forward looking by 6 months. Fed Chairman Powell is going to be gone. I believe it's in May of next year. So potentially, November this year or December this year until May of next year, that's 6 months. That's saying, okay, Trump's going to be able to handpick his man to put into the Federal Reserve, and they're going to start aggressive rate cuts from May next year. So is this really going to happen with aggressive rate cuts coming onto the table? In 2026, are we actually really going to dump? I just don't know. It's very uncertain. We just have to really take this market one step at a time. It's obviously difficult to look sort of too far in advance as to what's going to happen. But I do think that the market could really front run that and get carried away towards the end of this year. And then this new guy comes in, and when the rate cuts actually start, the market does then come off. So maybe we do actually get a bit of a bearish period in early 2026. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But for now, it feels like the summer is upon us. We're probably going to get chop. Probably bulls are going to get frustrated that are targeting massive upside prices. Bears that are targeting massive downside are probably also going to get frustrated. And I think it will be a trader's market and a trader's environment. You probably want to look to sell on pumps. You probably want to look to buy on dumps. But I do think this in general will be a bit of a distribution period over the summer before coming down to lower prices at the end of the summer, where there will be a bounce to play, much similar to like what we've seen at the end of last year and the start of this year. That was a period to distribute. We came down, we then got a decent bounce to play, and now I think we will distribute again. And this is all looking like it's just going to be one big range, which ultimately I do think ends up being a longer term distribution pattern before coming down and seeing some lower prices. But like I say, time will tell. So yeah, I'm giving it. What am I saying? I'm sort of giving it now. I mean, these two paths are very similar. I think one of these paths plays out. The other one I looked at where Bitcoin blasts to new all-time highs and just either continues up only or blasts to all-time highs and then just absolutely capitulates and crashes later this year. I'm giving that more of a lower probability scenario of that type of price action happening at the moment. Obviously, things can change. I think that only really becomes a possibility if we start to get very, very aggressively bought up to the upside and potentially Michael Saylor. And there's now talks of, I know he's got 24 billion, there's talks of 42 billion, now 84 billion that he's going to be buying. I mean, if he's loading that into the market over the summer, then potentially we do rock it up. But I just feel like the guy is getting used as exit liquidity, and at some point we are likely to see reality come into the market and go into a choppy period. I'm actually this is probably my preferred path here. I think some sort of high consolidation, dip into September, and then off higher. And yeah, that probably aligns with something that the S&P does as well. So anyways, it's nearly 2:30 in my time, GMT. So the market is about to open. That will be 9:30 New York time. So I'm going to leave it there and focus on the trading. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, and let's see how things play out. I know I've got some comments on my last video saying it hasn't aged too well. Obviously, I am looking at things from a longer term perspective, so I'm not in the business of trying to pick heads or tails where the market's going to go today, tomorrow, but I'm really trying to look at where the markets go over the next few months, and that is where my speciality lies. So yes, I'd like to think the majority of the last year I've called fairly well, including this sell-off. And let's see where we go from here. I think the stock market will dictate where crypto goes. If stocks do pull back, I find it unlikely that crypto's ripped to new all-time highs, but I do think for the rest of May, they could be pretty bullish. So yes, potentially more short-term upside to come before consolidation over the summer. So thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please do smash a like and subscribe not to miss out on the future videos. And I'll be back very, very soon. Have a wonderful day and talk to you all again later.